Aging is complex. It has a lot of interacting parts. A new field called systems biology can give us a more accurate picture of how aging works and maybe help get us closer to a cure. Systems biology is the use of big experimental datasets and computer models to understand biology, including the biology of aging. That's what this graph is. All the different kinds of protein in a single certain cell mapped out. We can think of a cell as a tiny submarine with thousands of little crewmen all working together to make it work. Before, we knew that they were in there. We sort of knew their identities, but we couldn't really see them working together in this much detail. This crazy web has always been there, but being able to see it and map it like this, all at once, is fairly new. When people looked through microscopes for the first time 200 years ago, an invisible part of biology was suddenly revealed. We started to understand cells and microbes, and the results were foundational to modern medicine and indeed modern life in general. Over the last 20 years, humans have invented new tools that rival the importance of the microscope. I'm Dr. Peter Allen. I'm a practicing bioanalytical chemist and host of this Science Curious channel. And if you're interested in stopping or slowing down aging, I hope you will stay tuned. I want to explain how systems biology will help us get closer to understanding and curing aging. To get there, we need to understand what even is systems biology. I first learned about systems biology when a researcher down the hall from me at the University of Texas, whose name was Edward Marcotte, published a high-profile paper in PNAS. They identified a group of molecules in yeast cells that also exist in frogs and people. This is sort of like how bones have homology. A bat wing serves a very different purpose compared to our hands, but the bones all map up together. That's the basic idea of homology. If you can drug that system in yeast and see a change in the cell wall, then if you understand the system well enough, you can predict what it will do in frogs and people. That's powerful stuff. That's systems biology, learning how things work together as a system and then applying that understanding to new contexts. Why do we have to study things as a whole system? Well, consider a cell. It's like a bag of proteins all working together, sort of like a crew in a little submarine. We can take the proteins out and we can see how they work by themselves, but it's harder to measure how they work together. That's the thing that systems biology is trying to get to. We can think of systems biology information in terms of graphs like this. This crazy web is the interactome of a cell, a bacterial cell in this case. It's sort of like a schematic diagram of an electrical circuit. Like this is the diagram of a flashlight, and we can use symbols to represent the different components, or we could represent different kinds of components as colors. That's what that intricate web is. It's a diagram of what color-coded proteins connect to what other color-coded proteins. But you can think of it in a different way. You could think of it as an org chart of all the little crew members in the little cell submarine. Just like a real org chart, it tells you a lot about who reports to whom. This lets us understand something important about the properties of an organization. Like take Penny Arcade. I've been reading that comic for 24 years. It started off as a collaboration between an artist Gabe and a writer Tycho. Between them, they produced something that neither could make on their own. They even made a comic about how they couldn't do it on their own when their characters broke up, and Gabe just made Ow My Balls comics while Tycho wrote these weird short stories about anthropomorphic punctuation marks. The magic happens. The good comics come out when they work together. That's a new property. What got even more remarkable was what changed when they brought on Robert Koo. He acted as their business manager. When he came along, they expanded beyond 3 comics a week into the Penny Arcade Expo, PAX, and their charity that helps sick kids. They've made these remarkable ventures, and these came out of the interactions, the partnership among these 3 people. It's an emergent property, something that's more than the sum of its parts. Emergent properties are when you connect things up and they do new interesting things. We can see this in really simple systems too. Like this is a pendulum, it just swings. If you put a shorter pendulum next to it on the pivot, they just swing at different speeds. But if you connect them in this way with one pendulum connected to the end of the first one, you get a non-periodic, chaotic motion. The system launches into totally new, unpredictable behavior. That is the simplest example of an emergent property. With that in mind, look at this network again. What kind of remarkable properties could this crazy web produce? One of those properties is called homeostasis. Biology maintains a constant state while doing lots of active adjustments. It looks like a steady state, but it's constantly working to maintain it through change. It's sort of like how a river looks like it's in the same place all the time, but it's always a new river. It's always changing. There's new water flowing through the same space in a similar pattern. Unlike a river, in cells and biology, this is maintained by continuous monitoring, continuous tweaking. That's what this network does. Patterns like our body temperature, our circadian rhythm, our waking and sleeping, these patterns are constantly being maintained by complex webs of interactions like this. Aging, full circle finally, is when those patterns start to fail. It's when patterns like homeostasis begin to break down. It's not just things wearing out, like an engine with too many miles on it. If we're going to slow or even cure aging, we need to understand aging at this level. This paper by Cohen articulates that. He says that if we understand a network of interactions like this really well, not just the little parts, but how they're connected and how strongly they're connected, we can mathematically model the whole system. That's what this graph is. We know how things are connected. A is connected to B, is connected to C, and we need to know the details. A generates more B, generates more C, and C slows down the generation of A. But even if we know this much, we need to know the precise measurements of how strongly those different elements affect one another. At one level of strength, you get cycles of high and low, all oscillating back and forth. With another level, it looks more like homeostasis, a flatter, more consistent amount of A, B, and C over time. Cohen presents a cartoonized version of the complex webs of interactions that make human biology. We're going to need to model all of them to understand aging, because aging is a really complex emergent property or breakdown of an emergent property of all of these systems together. Are you interested in aging biology? Do you have questions that you would like to see answered? Drop me a link in the comments or send me an email or a voicemail. There's a temporary email address and a phone number in the description and the pinned comment. Get in touch. Maybe I can use your question or comment in a future video. I will leave you anonymous unless you request otherwise. If you're interested in science, check out this last video on why do I have to learn that, where I talk to about the terrible but hilarious results when people don't bother to learn a little bit about DNA. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.